Oh, hey everyone, here's my next update. So it's been a couple days since I was working on the combine, on the valve cover gasket and all the little maintenance doodads. Yesterday it rained a bunch, so I was out here but I didn't get a whole lot accomplished. And now today, just the bottom fell out of the temperature here, and it's cold and windy. You can probably hear that. Today I've got to take a roller chain off. I found a couple of more things on the combine that should be serviced before we start. I've got a loose roller chain, and then both the grain elevator, the clean grain elevator, and the tailings elevator are loose. The chains are loose, and it looks to me like the tensioners are already maxed out. So it's probably going to be a case of loosening everything up and removing chain links, or getting real creative, because we don't want those loose chains break. Come off their gears, they break, they jam up. So we got to try to get those at least tightened up enough for this year's work, and then we can deal with it more in the off season. So that's what we're up to today. It's a lovely, lovely Minnesota day today. So here's what I'm talking about. It's this roller chain. It's pretty floppy, and this tensioner's already maxed out. This is actually the main drive wheel for the entire separator. It's got an electromagnetic clutch on it, and then this chain runs down and runs the feeder house and the pickup head. So it's kind of important. We need to get this chain off and then go get a replacement, so that, because it's just stretched out. They get stretched out when they wear over time. For those of you that aren't familiar, we have a repair link right here, which you take this little cap off of here. There's a little spring clip, and then the cap comes off, and then this link can pull out and the entire chain can be taken off. You know, no different than a bicycle, just a little heavier duty for farm equipment. Well, got that off easy enough. Now I'm off to John Deere for a new roller chain and some other miscellaneous stuff. Alright, so after 2 trips to John Deere, the first one I got the new roller chain, and I can't use both hands right now to show you, but if you pull this tight, it is still too short. I'm guessing the old chain had stretched so much that somebody took a link out of it, so when they counted the links for the new one, they were a little short. So I had to go back and get some half links to repair it and put it together. So now we're going to try to get it all attached and hooked back up. There, done. It is rotten out here. The wind is howling. It was snowing a minute ago, and it's freezing. Minnesota, awesome, thanks. Oh, it's another cold, windy day. It's sleeting. I guess this is just what we're going to have from now on. So it's Sunday, and I've resolved I'm going to buckle down and try to get this combine prep stuff finished today. I don't know if I can do it, but that's going to be the goal. I mentioned it had loose chains with the, well, let me back up here. We had loose chains on the main grain elevator. That one I was able to get tightened up. You can get at the top of the that little grain leg elevator thing, and there's tensioner bolts up there. Those were not quite maxed out, so I was able to get that one tensioned the way it's supposed to. But then the tailings elevator, which runs from here up and recycles anything that isn't threshed properly back into the machine, that is loose. I gotta hand it to John Deere. They did not make this easy. The tensioner bolts, there's one right there. That was maxed out, so even though the chain was loose, you can't tighten it up anymore, because it was actually, didn't have any threads left on that tensioner rod. So then the only solution is you have to loosen this up and take the tension off the chain, make the chain even more loose, and then take a link out of it, and then you can put it all back together again, and that'll gain you a bunch more space on the tensioner. The problem is that the other side, you can't hardly get in there. There's almost no working room. So I got a vice grip on it. Then of course the nut on the back side of that tensioner bolt was spinning as well. So I finally managed to get a vice grip on the other one, and now I'm trying to get this loose enough where I can back this off, back this down far enough that the chain will loosen up. This is the last major kind of repair that I have to do. I guess I wouldn't call it major. I mean, major is if the thing blows up. This is the last significant repair that I have to do today, and then just finish greasing and oiling the chains and lubrication pretty much, check the tire pressure, And then maybe the last big thing is to put the duals on. So I don't know if I'll get the duals on today, but if I can get everything done to where this thing is able to run and operate properly, then I'll be in good shape. I did set the concaves. You know, in the modern combines, it's pretty cool. You want to change your concaves, it's just basic settings within the machine, or there's some easy levers to deal with. Here you have to get in here with wrenches, and that's how you adjust the rear concave spacing. Luckily on this one, the front concave spacing just has a lever in the cab, so they had made some advancements. On earlier models of the same combine, you had to also adjust that with nuts and bolts and threaded rods and checking it. So concave spacing, fan speed, beater speed, all those things I still need to set, but those should all be quick and easy steps for the most part. So I've got this loosened up pretty good. The chain's really loose. The only place you can get this is down at the bottom where you open up this clean out door. The way you get these links apart, for those of you who don't farm, haven't done equipment repair before, the links on this kind of chain slide past one another, but you have to get them at an angle. You have to get them so that I can't do this with one hand very well. You have to get them so that they're at a 90-degree angle almost, and then you can see that leg will slide through that slot, but it's kind of sprung so that you need to pound on it to get that to happen. But what I'm running into is I've got this totally loosened up, so I've got all this slack, but it's not enough yet. I can't get the link changer. There's a little doodad here you can use to hold the links, so you can pound on them. It acts like a little anvil and holds them in place. But I can't get that in here with the space being what it is, and then if I get a link out, the chain's going to be even shorter and it's going to be hard to get back together. So this cog, this sprocket, is actually held in with a couple of cotter keys. So I'm going to remove those cotter keys, get this sprocket slid off to the side, and then I should have more room to do what I need to do in here. And I don't know, with any luck, maybe that'll get it done. Alright, success. I had to break the cotter keys off, but cotter keys are cheap, so that's not a big deal. So now we've got a lot more room to work with this chain, get that link out and shorten it up. So now I'm just looking for a good link here that looks like it's going to come apart easy. Normally, with this link changer, you get the links in there, you can bang on them with a hammer, but since we're in such an enclosed space, I'd like to try to do this as gently as possible. So I might take a file and kind of ease the edges of one of those links to try to make sure everything's nice and smooth and the tolerances are a little bit loose, and then we can get it apart that much easier. Normally, if you were on working on an open elevator that wasn't in a tight space like this would be pretty simple, but because we're constricted here, it makes it that much harder. So we really don't want to beat this up too bad. We want it to go easy. Alright, so the problem is I can get the link started as far as sliding and coming apart. I just can't get it all the way, so I'm going to do a little more fiddling around here. Okay, so I filed the link a little more. If you kind of file the throat open, it'll slide easier. The concern would be that then when you put it back together, it won't stay together, but if we keep tension on the chain, it should be just fine. As long as it's checked regularly, it's not going to just fall apart. Everything's flexing the other direction anyway from the way it needs to come apart, so it's almost impossible. I got a good feeling. Oh, it's going. Ha! Got it. There we go. Now it's apart. Now we can work a little more independently to be able to get this link out of here, and then we'll be able to join the next one to this one down here and shorten everything up by one link on the chain. In theory, this should be easier. If you're wondering, do you ever hit your hand? The answer is yes, and that's a bad day. Well, this one's not going to cooperate either. Part of the problem is the links get worn and they get metal burrs on them, and the burrs catch in that channel, so they don't want to come apart unless you smooth them out a little bit. There we go. Link removed. Success. Now we just have to get it back together again. Actually, getting them back together is often the easier process. I could use my link changer tool, but I've got a cast iron bearing journal here that I can put this up against. So I think maybe I can get it without having to squeeze an extra tool in this little space. Okay. We're having some luck today. I needed a lucky day. Okay, so we're back together. I got, Dad and I always keep a nice collection of cotter keys here on the farm, so we've always got a selection to choose from, brand new. And found two that worked and got that, that sprocket back on and in place and the chain over it. So now it's still loose. Okay, so after a bunch of monkeying around, I got this all tightened up again. So now the tailings elevator chain is tight. It just needs to be oiled. I've been going around greasing. This belt's still loose because I still have a little bit to do with the clean grain elevator. There's a chain up there that needs to be tightened before that belt is put back on. And otherwise I'm just going around greasing and just getting odds and ends, but we're getting close. Well, it was a couple of days ago that we were working on the elevator chains and stuff on here. That was a case where I kind of got that elevator chain fixed, and then I just didn't take any more video because I was buckling down and getting a bunch of things greased. I got all the Zerks greased on the 55 here. I got everything lubed up and ready to go. I got the tires pumped up. I thought, okay, now we're pretty much set. We're in a good spot. Went to start the combine, dead, wouldn't start. I'm gonna go ahead and blame Zach Johnson for that. It just seems like a thing that maybe he would have caused. Now it's a couple days later and we switched to electrical. I had to work on Monday, so today's Tuesday. Yesterday afternoon I went and got the alternator tested because I had put a gauge on it before. I'd put a voltage gauge on it, and it was making like 12.5 volts, and I thought, it just doesn't seem like it's really charging. And sure enough, took the alternator into John Deere. They threw it on a bench tester. They couldn't get anything out of it. So that was an old alternator with an external regulator. We got ourselves a replacement that's a much more modern 72 amp alternator. So now today's task is to get that hooked up, wired up, and working properly. And then, I hope, we'll have this machine ready to go. It's really started to feel more like a restoration than anything at this point. We've spent a lot of time. But you know, that's how it goes with older equipment. You buy something that's used, you bring it home, and then you start to really realize what there is to do on it as you go through it. So with any luck, this will be a kind of a one-time deal to go through, fix a lot of these little bugs. I like to have my equipment in good shape. Even if it's older, we want it to be working properly, or at least have everything set up to a point where it doesn't feel like it's going to blow up at any minute. So that's our task for today. Get the electrical figured out, get this thing fired up, and then I believe we're ready for soybeans. Right, so necessary tools. I've got a box here. This has got all kinds of wire connectors in it. This is my wiring toolkit. I got a solder iron in there. The soldering iron's about as old as the combine is, so it seems appropriate. A couple of different rolls of wire that we can use to upgrade some of the wiring. Since it's a higher amperage alternator, I wanted to make sure we had good 10 gauge wire for the output wire. And hey, the original manual. I've been looking through this. I talked about it a few times, but there it is. Got it in a nice new plastic bag so we don't make it any worse than it is as far as condition of the paper. So that's our tools of the trade here. If we climb up, here's our old alternator, minus the regulator, and here's our new one. And so the challenge today is to get this hooked up right over here. There's the alternator mounting bracket, here's the slider bracket. Get everything aligned, and then luckily the manual does have a good accurate wiring diagram in it. Thanks, John Deere, good job. So we should be able to figure out which, there were other plugs here, and so these 3 wires got split into like 6 wires for the regulator. So we're gonna figure out which one goes. I'm pretty sure it's the orange wire here goes to the indicator light. That'll be our exciter wire, and then one of these has to go to the coil, and the other one might actually be omitted at this point. I have to dig into that a little more, and then we'll go from there. Wires. Alright, so this was pretty straightforward. Here's a lesson for wiring an alternator for any of you who need to ever know how to do this. You've got a main battery post in the back. That's where your lead goes. In this case, it goes over to the starter solenoid, but it's basically connected directly to the positive lead on the battery. This is a sort of a Delco 10SI style of alternator. I don't really know who made it, it's not labeled. Then we've got a jumper wire. That's this green wire, goes from that same positive output terminal to the number 2 pin on the alternator. That's what lets it know that there's current there. Then this orange wire goes to the indicator bulb on the dash. That's our warning light that lets us know that the alternator is charging or not. And this purple one is just a reference wire that it hooks to the switch, the ignition switch. The indicator light provides a certain amount of resistance. So if you don't have an indicator light in line with this wire, you have to put a diode in or something similar that provides a little resistance and doesn't allow any backflow. But since we've got the battery light in the cab and it works, and I want to keep it because it's a nice thing to have, we're just able to hook straight up. So, and then this green wire went to the coil, and that's where it's still going. So I just modified this plug that went into the old regulator, external regulator, and added some new connectors that are insulated so that they can't touch each other, and tightened everything up. So now we just have to put the battery in, start it up, and see if it's charging. Alright, so a quick follow-up. After I had it running and showed you the voltage gauge there, I noticed I hopped in the cab and turned on the lights, and the lights were dimming and brightening at a regular interval, and the generator light kept coming on and off. What I ended up doing is this reference wire here that was hooked up to that pin, I disconnected that, because these alternators are designed to work as like a 3-wire alternator, and that extra wire apparently was not doing what I was thinking it was. So once I fired the combine back up with this wire disconnected, then it had a nice consistent charge. It wasn't kicking on and off. This wire was even a little warm, so I'm pretty sure that I just had that hooked up wrong. Simple mistake. So don't take my advice. If you're wiring an alternator from the earlier segment, maybe just treat it like a standard 3-wire alternator and you should be in good shape. I'm gonna just eliminate this. We'll pull this pin out of this plug, and there will be nothing that can short out then, and life will be good. So the funny thing is, after I got that alternator fixed, I flipped on some of these lights and a bunch of them came on, and they hadn't before. So, you know, I'm still probably going to rework a bunch of stuff, because this wiring, this is all the wiring for the lights. This is bonkers. You know, no judgment on the past owners. They're doing the best they can, but we can do something better than that. And actually, I got to tell you, it would be nice to switch these out for LEDs. Hold on a minute. I'll show you something cool. This is our big tractor on the farm. This is a 4020 John Deere. And I want to focus on the lights here for a minute. This thing used to have the old sealed beam lights on the cab. They didn't work. Half the wiring was falling apart on them. They used to have a dimmer switch like you'd see in an old, on the floor of an old, you know, 1970s automobile. And none of it worked very well. So I went ahead a couple of years ago. There's the back ones. I can't see too well, but those are our field lights. I went ahead a couple of years ago and I ordered lights from a company up near Fergus Falls, Alexandria, that part of Minnesota. Not quite sure what town they're closest to. They're on the Dakota border. Larson Lights. Really recommend them. If you need tractor lights, they have LED lights that I felt pretty reasonable prices. I outfitted this whole tractor. It was about $400, but that was for everything I needed, and this thing has incredible nighttime lights now. It basically brought it up to a modern standard, some of those floods that you see on the nice newer tractors. We used to like to plow at night. Now obviously we're not plowing anymore because we switched to no-till, but if we need to work at night, we know this tractor can really give us a lot of illumination. I mean, even in the daytime you can see that. The old sealed beams were really dim. I wish I could show you this at night. Maybe we will at some point, but Larson Lights, keep them in mind. They're a great company, fun to work with. I'll probably order anything else on the farm that I ever need for lights from them. Alright, well I think I can say confidently at this point, this thing is as ready as it's going to get. Everything that I know to tune up on it is tuned up. And I'm sure we'll find some more stuff, but it's going to take us getting into the field to discover those things, so we'll just take care of those on the fly. The only thing left to do is put the duals on it. Everything else is ready, so one thing off the list. It was a big one, but it's off the list now.